The meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go down the list of members alphabetically, and please unmute and indicate if you are present. Chair Banger.
Present.
Thank you. Jeffrey Barton. Ben Bitter.
Here.
Thank you. Scott Butler.
Present.
Thank you. Greg Caton.
Here.
Thank you. Amy Rebinar as proxy for Andrew Ching.
Here.
Thank you. Ron Corbin.
Here.
Thank you. Henry Darwin.
Here.
Thank you. Robert Niles as proxy for Crystal Dykes.
Here.
Thank you. Bruce Gardner.
Here.
Thank you. Rachel Goodwin.
Here.
Thank you. Rosa Inchausti.
Present.
Thank you. Suzanne Jones. Jeff Kulaga.
Here.
Thank you. Leo Liu. Vice Chair Ray.
Here.
Thank you. Alexis Tamron Kinsey as proxy for Jessica Mefford Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack as proxy for Brian Myers.
Present.
Thank you. Grady Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Here.
Thank you. Calvin Pilcher.
Here.
Thank you. Jem Korsky. John Pombier. Bryant Powell.
Here.
Thank you. Wynette Reed.
Present.
Thank you. David Roderick.
Here.
Thank you. Troy Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Brian Stutzman.
Present.
Thank you. Jennifer Toth.
Here.
Thank you. Catherine Valenzuela.
Here.
Thank you. Bruce Walls. Matthew Williams.
Present.
Thank you. And Bob Wingenroth.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you, staff. Okay, next, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we proceed with today's agenda, I'd like to welcome John Pombier and Brian Stutzman to the committee. John is the acting city manager for Chandler, and Brian has been appointed town manager of Youngstown. Congratulations, Brian. Okay, next we'll move to call to the audience. I do not have any requests to speak. Before I move on, is there anyone in the audience present that would like to speak? Seeing no one, MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to the audience?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've received no online written comments for call to the audience.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 4. Items 4A through 4D are for information only. Does any member of the committee have any questions or requested presentation on any of these items? Okay, seeing no one, I'll solicit a motion for approval of, these are for information only. My apologies. We'll move on to item 5, the consent agenda. Items 5A and 5D are on the consent agenda. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Okay, seeing no one, prior to the approval of the consent agenda, there's an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any item on the consent agenda. Have we received any requests to speak on consent agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've received no online written comments for the consent agenda.
Okay, have we received any online comments for the consent agenda?
No, we have not.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to approve consent items 5A through 5D? We have a motion by Mr. Phelps,
Second.
second by Wynette. All those in favor, please sign aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay, we'll now have those participating in the meeting online take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. All those in favor, sign aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the items on consent agenda are hereby passed. We'll move to item 6.
Mr. Chair, I think we may need to check in with a couple folks who didn't have their cameras on.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, Catherine Valenzuela, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Thank you. And Robert Niles, how do you vote, please?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
The motion passes.
thank you. All right, moving on to item number 6, micro trenching best practices. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Maggie Wong, Senior Management Analyst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of Management Committee. Today, I'll be presenting an overview of microtrenching best practices, which were developed through our microtrenching working group and peer research study. So as a reminder, this topic was brought to our attention at the November Management Committee. MAG was requested to further explore the topic of microtrenching, including current practices and nationwide perspectives. We were also asked to convene a working group. Before we dive into that, we'll start with a brief background and refresher on microtrenching itself. So microtrenching is a method of fiber installation, and fiber is a technology that's used for high-speed internet. It carries light signals to transmit data super fast over long distances. And the benefit of fiber is that it's more efficient than traditional copper lines, which means that it has better performance overall, higher speeds and bandwidth, and extended lifetime and reliability. So it's important to our region because fiber expands the reach of high-speed internet to residents, businesses, and communities. So typically, fiber installation involves placing conduit deep underground to then pull the fiber through. So as shown here, a traditional method of that is open trenching, which involves digging a deep and wide trench to then place the conduit into, and this is typically done in dirt. This is a labor-intensive process because it involves excavation and heavy machinery, so it can become very costly very quickly. Microtrenching is a newer method that involves saw cutting a narrow trench at significantly shallower depths than traditional trenching. This is typically done in asphalt. This method started in the early 2010s and began gaining traction around 2016 or 2017, becoming a more widespread, cost-effective alternative to traditional methods of fiber installation. Large cities such as Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago all use microtrenching for fiber installation. And the key difference between open trenching and microtrenching really is the depth. So open trenching goes to maximum depths of up to 48 inches, whereas microtrenching only goes to a maximum depth of about 18 to 24 inches. It's really this shallower depth that makes it a more cost-effective method. There are significant time and cost savings for the utility provider, as it's a quicker installation with reduced capital costs, and it's also a less intrusive method, reducing disruptions to traffic and businesses, and also lowering the risk of striking existing utility lines that are deeper underground. However, there are also risks associated with microtrenching, the first of which is the damage to the fiber itself, since it's at those shallower depths. Depending on the placement and quality of the installation, there are also risks to damage to agency infrastructure, and it can lead to a need for frequent repairs, which would only add to the costs. Microtrenching is also subject to region-specific weather and traffic conditions, which could lead to performance issues. So it's important for us to understand these risks in order to think of ways to prevent or mitigate damages. And this is a topic of growing interest throughout our region, especially as local agencies are looking for ways to expand broadband access to residents. And we know that there's a wide range of experiences throughout the MAG region, from those who are still considering microtrenching to pilot projects to early adopters. And so with that region-wide interest, it's really important to weigh these benefits and risks. At the direction of Management Committee, we wanted to further explore the following topics of peer agency experiences, wear and tear, licensing agreements, and best practices. So we initiated a peer research study with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute involving 3 components. The first is a literature review that covers current practices with microtrenching. The second part dives into the national experience through conversations with peer agencies and industry professionals. And finally, we wanted to consider the potential impacts and best practices specific to our region. Through this study, we were able to conduct interviews with 5 peer agencies and 2 industry professionals. We also conducted some additional research and investigation for 6 peer agencies and 3 states, just to better understand that wider range of experience across the nation. Also, at the direction of Management Committee, we convened a working group made up of member agency technical staff. And the purpose of this working group was to review the findings from that research study and provide additional local input and technical expertise that could then serve as a foundation for local agencies to make their own decisions about microtrenching. We had really great participation from 15 member agencies and really want to thank your technical staff for their time. Their input, engagement, and participation was really helpful as we had discussions about questions, concerns, and learned more about the local experiences as we developed these best practices. So now we'll dive into the best practices. These were informed by the research study, especially those peer agency interviews, and we also received local input and feedback from the working group. The best practices can be categorized into these topics: technical considerations, permitting, maintenance and repair, project management, and other considerations. Today, I'll be sharing 4 of the key takeaways from the best practices. The first of which is that we heard over and over again that depth is the most important component when it comes to microtrenching. You want to be deep enough to avoid most road maintenance, while still being shallow enough to avoid hitting any existing utilities. Microtrenching places the fiber and conduit closer to the surface, which means that at shallower depths, it can be impacted by heavy traffic loads, construction work, or even routine pavement maintenance, which is why it's really important for local agencies to put a lot of thought and consideration into their minimum depth requirements. One notable example is from Louisville, Kentucky, where a microtrenching project used experimentally shallow depths of only about 2 inches. That led to the fiber popping out from the streets and becoming exposed, causing major disruptions and ultimately leading to the failure of that project. However, 2 other examples come out of San Antonio and Nashville, where they also ran into issues with shallower depth. They found that the fiber optic cables were getting hit, and routine pavement maintenance such as mill and overlay was actually pulling up the fiber and damaging it. However, they were able to work with the utility provider to adjust their minimum depth requirements to be a little bit deeper, and were able to continue with a successful deployment. Additionally, ensuring a high quality and smooth installation process is very important for microtrenching. As mentioned before, there are risks to damage to agency infrastructure, such as pavements, sidewalks, bike lanes, and gutters. So each project is going to have site-specific considerations to determine the best method in terms of placement, location, and materials. For microtrenching, residential streets are often ideal because there are less utility conflicts. And pavement conditions are a critical factor. So if the pavement is already in poor condition, microtrenching installations can exacerbate that issue. And on that note, MAG does have pavement data for collector roads and up. So if any local agencies are interested in better understanding their conditions, that's information that we can provide. Also, as mentioned before, microtrenching is subject to region-specific weather and traffic conditions. So for example, sealants can degrade over time due to temperature fluctuations, exposure to UV or water, or traffic loads. Because the materials are temperature and climate dependent, it is crucial that they're specified in consultation with local pavement engineers. And this example from Fullerton, California, really highlights the importance of careful installation. We can see that this initial installation was not well done, with poor restoration and major aesthetic issues. This led to public complaints, and the city worked with a provider to fix and in many cases redo these installations. So you can see that it was significantly improved afterwards. Peer agencies also emphasize the importance of communication and long-term coordination between the agency and provider to be vital for success. This includes having continuous feedback loops to improve the processes, and also scheduling regular project management and coordination meetings. Local agencies should also clearly identify their priorities, especially when it comes to pavement requirements. So we heard from peer agency and local agency technical staff that there are concerns about how microtrenching may impact pavement integrity. And this is a valid concern because pavements are a highly visible and costly infrastructure. There are trade-offs to microtrenching, so it's really a balance of wanting to protect your infrastructure while still allowing some level of flexibility to expand high-speed internet access for residents, especially for areas where other installation methods are too costly. Additionally, utility owners need to provide a local contact in order to address issues promptly, both during and after the installation. Ongoing documentation of microtrenching locations is also important, as well as clear repair requirements that the utility owner is responsible for. This will ensure that there is good coordination, especially for pavement maintenance activities, to minimize damage to infrastructure as well as to the fiber. So for example, agencies can notify microtrenching providers ahead of time about scheduled roadwork or routine pavement maintenance, so the provider has time to prepare and prevent or minimize disruptions. Finally, the last key takeaway is that it's important to continue monitoring newer installation methods, such as nanotrenching, which is a subset of microtrenching that is narrower and shallower. This, of course, raises concerns with depth because, as we saw earlier, shallow depths are not ideal, but providers are experimenting with new technologies and techniques to help enhance the stability at these shallower depths. So nanotrenching can be a cost-effective method to expand access to high-speed internet connections, especially for areas that have fiscal constraints or funding challenges. The success of the installation is also really dependent on pavement condition, especially at these shallower depths. So it really depends on the pavement already not having cracks or chips in order for the installation to go smoothly. Specifying maintenance requirements through the licensing agreements is also really important for these shallower depth installations to ensure coordination with pavement maintenance, ongoing blue staking, and timely repairs. So ultimately, there is pretty limited data and information on nanotrenching at this time, especially because pilot projects are newer within the past few years. So the longevity of the materials is still unknown, and you should still continue monitoring them for longer-term impacts. So taking an overall look at the timeline of these efforts, again, the initial request was made back in November, and shortly after we initiated our peer research study. In February, we received more specific direction to convene a technical staff working group. That working group met 3 times to review findings from the study and to develop these best practices. And so today is a culmination of these efforts and a delivery of the final product, which is a best practices report. So the complete best practices report is in your agenda packets and has also been published online. You can scan the QR code here or go to azmag.gov/regional-studies to access it. The full report has more details, including interview studies, and also has the peer agency microtrenching standards attached for reference. We also created a condensed 2-page summary of just the best practices for easy reference. And this document is really intended as a resource and tool for local agencies to inform local decisions about microtrenching. It can be used as a starting point or a reference, and local agencies are encouraged to customize and adapt these considerations to your own specific local needs, conditions, and priorities. That wraps up my presentation for today. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mankey. Excellent presentation and work. Do any of our members have questions for Mankey about the report, the presentation?
Mr. Chair, if I may. Thanks, Maggie, for the presentation. I just wanted to share with the group that the town of Queen Creek worked with Google and with Crown Castle to implement some of these trenching opportunities. With Crown Castle, we did nano trenching. And as we have in the past, if anyone would like to come view kind of that product, feel free just to contact me or my staff, and we'd be willing to do that. We needed to think outside the box in Queen Creek in order to get these technologies in the community and providing these opportunities for the industry to be able to do these type of trenching has significantly increased those opportunities for our residents to get Google and other fiber companies to the home, and also increase our capacity and coverage for our cell providers through the nanotechnologies. Crown Castles is about completed their project, and they're about ready to turn on 12 small cell sites where we've had 0, and opportunity to increase that to 40 through the nanotechnology. So these things do work. It also doesn't ignore the fact that they also have to be required to do some regular trenching as well because of conflicts, and they're willing to do that. But I just want to share Queen Creek's experiences and opportunities to get these technologies to our residents because of these efforts the region is doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else? Yes, please, Mr. Phelps.
So in talking with the consultants and the research, have they started to develop a kind of a long range forecast of over in terms of how long the installation will maintain its integrity with relationship to the road? Because it's relatively new. I mean, when we do a mill and overlay, we're not hoping it'll work for 3 years. It's generally going to be a much longer lifespan that we're trying to get out of that. So is there any research that's being done that's kind of showing what the kind of what the long-term effects are going to be on wear and tear on the installation?
Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee, thank you for that great question. I think what we found is that issues typically arise within the first 3 years, if not immediately, and it really depends on the site-specific conditions of installation, right? Because with pavements, if they're already in poor condition, the installation, especially if the restoration is not done correctly, can just make the issue worse. So it's a little hard to have an overall statistic for that. But what we found from our study is that within 3 years is when we start to see issues if they arise.
Thank you. With regards to the, I guess every city can kind of determine how they want to authorize, but are there any agreements or franchise agreements or other things that cities have instituted that kind of sets forth the responsibilities, the parameters of by allowing it to make sure that there's a certain responsibility on the utility essentially that's putting it in?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee, it's highly recommended that those types of maintenance and repair requirements are included in the licensing agreements. We had some really great discussions in the working group, and a couple of member agencies were willing to share those agreements with specific language about how they protected themselves by having those requirements for utility owners.
Great. And did I hear that the recommendation seems to point more towards residential streets versus major roadways and arterials for that application, for the application of microtrenching?
Mr. Chair, members of Management Committee, looking at overall, it is more ideal because there's less utility conflicts. However, there are examples in our region of places that have tried microtrenching with arterials. So it really just depends on the location and the specific standards that are in place to protect it.
Thank you. And then final question, and this may not be able to answer, but I'm just kind of curious, as most major urban cities have an incumbent cable provider that's been making the migration over to fiber. They, in most cities that I'm familiar with, those were required to trench and to put in conduit outside of the roadway right of way, but within the right of way of the city. And now there's a certain cost to doing that. But there's certain advantages back to the city because we don't, we clearly, are able to keep from having conflicts with existing other underlying utilities. Has there been discussion about kind of the fairness from a business model of saying we require of our incumbent provider that does maybe broadband in addition to fiber services, that we're going to continue to keep them in kind of in the more expensive infrastructure or installation versus now allowing a competitor to come in that can then do a very simple installation or simpler installation that may give them a competitive advantage? Was there any discussion about how communities are grappling with that?
Mr. Chair, members of Management Committee, that is a really great question. We had some discussions in our working group and through our peer agency interviews about multiple providers. We didn't quite talk about kind of an incumbent company and the competitive advantage there. So unfortunately, not much to share, but we do have some language in our best practices report about some of the risks and protections to take into account when there are multiple providers. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By the way, I just want to note that she did say 2 excellent questions in that line of questions. So just want to bring that into the record again.
Maggie is a very polite member of the next. Maggie, was there any consideration or study done when you have multiple providers microtrenching within the same road and offsetting them from one another, and any issues with stability of the pavement on the whole, because you now have sections kind of disconnected from the slab itself?
Right. Mr. Chair, members of Management Committee, yeah, that's a discussion we had. And so in our report, we have some more specific technical language that I can't recall right now,
Okay.
but we do have a reference point at least for what we consider to be an adequate separation for trenches. I will say I think it's fairly limited in application right now, but it's a conversation topic that is coming up more as providers are interested in coming in.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions for Maggie? Yes, Scott?
Yeah, Maggie, thank you for the presentation. And Patrick, just to piggyback off Kevin's comment, I know when the city of Mesa went down this path, and I think at least for the region, we were an early adopter to this. We started talking to Google Fiber back in, I want to say 2017 initially. COVID really set things back, and then we kind of pivoted, which ended up being a great benefit. But we came in with the challenge of wanting to get fiber to every home and every business across the 140 square miles of the city of Mesa. And we didn't want companies that were just going to cherry pick the most affluent neighborhoods or the most advantageous. We wanted to see something that was a community-wide build. And working through with the different providers, coming up with utilizing, as Bruce said, microtrenching really was the only plausible path to get us in that direction. And right now, ask staff to pull these numbers for us. We have already installed, or the companies have already installed, 3.5 million feet of microfiber already into our right-of-way. They're permitted for another 3 million, and there's still millions more to go after that. Our staff has had a really positive experience. Of course, there's been challenges, but the companies have been great to work with. And then with the incumbent provider, we offered them the same opportunity as well. If they wanted to, if they preferred to do microtrenching, that was an opportunity that we wanted to offer with them, and there was interest in that regard. But I think, at least for Mesa, and Bruce could probably speak to this too, we've definitely seen, I think, the fruits of that investment by seeing internet speeds. We now have the fastest residential internet speeds in the nation. 8 gigs are available to those that have fiber service in Mesa. They're testing up to 20 gigs, and I know that was not the opportunity that we had before there was competition in the market. And I think to us that's been one of the best advantages to this, is seeing major companies compete, which has driven down pricing but has encouraged that further investment and expansion across our city. And so we're really happy with what we've seen with microtrenching.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, please. Right.
Yeah, just interested, not only the dynamic in a city within the winners and losers, but what about in a region where a city like Apache Junction really doesn't have? It seems like to me the cities and towns that have this already are the ones that are going with tremendous investment, and we're still the ones not getting it. Was there any discussion in the other city municipal areas or regions where towns that may not have the same potential risk benefit that are lower income cities, not within cities, but within cities and towns,
Right.
that are policies that can done to help get us broadband?
Right. Mr. Chair, members of Management Committee, that wasn't a specific topic that was brought up, but I think that seeing as microtrenching and nanotrenching can be used as a more cost-effective method, especially for areas that are looking to expand their access and other installations methods are too costly, it is something to look into and consider.
Yeah, Brian, along those regards, we had seen where things were heading with the insatiable need for as much bandwidth as possible, not only in our business districts, but within our community on the whole, the residential areas as well. And we did 2 RFP processes trying to solicit companies to come in and overbuild our communities with fiber. And this was probably back around 2015, 16, up until the pandemic, and we didn't find anybody. And at that time, Jen Daniels was our mayor, and we were seriously discussing possibly doing this ourselves if we couldn't find a provider to come in and do that. We also made a decision with every road project. And for any of the communities that are still in that phase of a lot of growth ahead of you, we started putting in 2 4-inch conduits with every road project while we have the trenches open, putting the utilities, the conduits extremely cheap. And we're now leasing that conduit to providers, but we actually had commenced a study to see what would be the cost of building out our community ourselves and running it as an enterprise fund operation. And the pandemic hit, and as Scott had mentioned, that kind of was the needle across the record for so many things. And then by that time, when we came back out of it, we did receive a response from Gigapower, AT&T. And what we had also done, our biggest priority, it was the same as Mesa's. We needed to get broadband into our community in front of every home and business as a competitive advantage for our community. And then the next element that we were decision point was, protecting the integrity of our infrastructure, and that's why we opted against micro trenching. And AT&T is doing directional boring in our town right now. The biggest concern was if those seals were not done properly, water infiltration into the subgrade, which is the single biggest thing to degrade the quality of our most expensive infrastructure. And so they are doing directional boring. We actually did hire a consultant, though, to develop some micro trenching standards for us, given that we believe we may run across situations where we had no other choice but to micro trench. We haven't done it up to this point. Like Bruce, we are doing the nano trenching within residential streets to hit those small cell sites, and we're encouraged by what we've seen from Queen Creek's experience thus far, and we're looking forward to the completion of our pilot study and see if that's a viable tool. But I think the most important thing, and I'm so appreciative of MAG for taking this on and bringing some information to us for best practices, because the most important thing for this region and every city is to have broadband as deeply into our communities and business districts as possible.
Appreciate that. That'll help us a lot. Private markets tend to want to go to where the money is first and reduce risk. We have a challenge as being at the end of the row, if you will, the farmland, at the end of the cul-de-sac, just in general in Apache Junction, but just in general, not maybe an idea of a lucrative, less risk kind of situation. We do have a lot of people that still are just trying to get some level of connectivity. So no, it's a great idea.
Unfortunately, I'm old enough in my career. I remember when cable TV was still being rolled out nationally. You had the same thing where they hit the larger markets first, and there's a lot of cities across the nation that actually stood up their own cable networks, and then they eventually sold out. But it's certainly something Apache Junction could look at. Are there any more questions for Maggie? Okay, Maggie, again, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. Okay, that item was for information purposes only. We'll move on to number 7. Superstition Vista's Multimodal Transportation Planning Study Update. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Will be presented by Hannah Quincy, our Senior Planner with MAG.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Management Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the Superstition Vista's Multimodal Transportation Planning Study. In this presentation, I'll highlight the study's progress, illustrating the area's growth and how we can mitigate existing transportation constraints with a vision for the future transportation network in this fast-growing subregion. The Superstition Vistas study area spans roughly 287 square miles within the city of Apache Junction, the town of Florence, the city of Mesa, the town of Queen Creek, and Maricopa and Pinal counties, with land managed by the Arizona State Land Department and sitting adjacent to the Gila River Indian community. The study has followed a data-driven planning process to assess and develop recommendations for multimodal near-term and long-range transportation networks that support the area's population and employment growth. And throughout the study, we've taken direction from the study area's agencies through a technical advisory group and sought input from stakeholders and the public. To illustrate the growth in the Superstition Vistas study area, I will walk you through a series of current and forecasted socioeconomic condition snapshots, with the darker colors representing higher concentrations of population and employment. Shown on your screen here is the existing population in the study area. MAG forecasts that population will grow 70% over the next 25 years. Here showing the growth in population by 2030 and population growth by 2050. Employment is also expected to grow 152% by 2050. Here is shown existing employment growth by 2030, and employment growth by 2050. We can see both with population and employment that concentrations are highest really, the growth of concentrations highest really in those western portions of the study area. And we see this population and employment really spread to those eastern boundaries by 2050. Traffic volumes will grow as well between now and 2050. The darker and more red the lines are shown here are the corridors with the highest traffic volumes. This on your screen is shown the existing traffic volumes. This is the growth in traffic volumes by 2030 and the growth in traffic volumes by 2050. The study identifies major mobility constraints stemming from rapid growth, increased traffic congestion, limited capacity of existing roadways, and gaps in the roadway grid. Our study team developed recommended multimodal transportation networks for 2030 and 2050 horizons with projects sourced from a combination of MAG's regional investment plan, local capital improvement programs, and adopted plans, as well as new recommendations that were identified through the study's network stress testing scenarios. And the cornerstone of these networks are the roadway and intersection recommendations. The 2030 and 2050 roadway networks include 136 new or widened roadway projects and 33 operational intersection improvements. Shown on your screen, the 2030 network addresses current rapid development pressures in the western portions of the study area by expanding existing roadway capacities and closing key connectivity gaps in the grid network. The map's orange lines represent roadway widening, and the green lines are new roadway construction. Intersection enhancements, which are shown as the dots on the map, are also identified to improve traffic flow and to mitigate localized congestion. You'll see a focus on widening both east-west and north-south arterials, particularly where growth is most concentrated. Many of these projects address congestion hotspots along corridors like Hunt Highway, Ironwood Road, Ellsworth Road, and Germain Road, which are already operating near capacity. To support future development, especially east of the Central Arizona Project Canal, the 2050 network adds several new east-west and north-south roadway corridors to complete the grid network and create new access points to US 60. The networks close key roadway gaps, and for example, completing missing segments along Meridian Road and extending Southern Avenue to improve east-west connectivity in Apache Junction. The recommended networks also include a total of 12 distinct freeway projects as shown on your screen to enhance regional mobility and support freight travel, including critical improvements to the State Route 24 and the future north-south corridor. By 2030, for example, the State Route 24 is planned to be converted to a full freeway with grades separated interchanges to alleviate pressure on surrounding arterials. The recommended networks also include 199 non-motorized projects. The dotted lines on these maps show new multi-use paths, bike lanes, safer crossings, and trail connections, shown here for 2030 on-street, 2050 on-street, as well as 2050 off-street facilities. The recommended networks also include potential long-range fixed route transit extensions, including extensions of the Route 108 in Mesa and routes 156 or 184 to Queen Creek. These recommended networks also include preferred freight corridors, shown as dashed lines here, and that these corridors continue to support industrial growth, including the Pecos Industrial Rail Access and Train Extension, known as the Pirate Spur, and connections to the Union Pacific Main Line. Strategic planning is essential for developments to expand, like the LG Energy Facility, shown by the star on the map, and the Elliott Road Tech Corridor that's circled on the map here. Recently, the study team reached consensus on the network recommendations with the Technical Advisory Committee, working with your agencies. The next steps in the study will invite public and stakeholder review of these recommendations. Feedback on the draft recommendations will shape the final report, which will also include an implementation and funding strategy. We anticipate bringing the final plan for this study to MAG policy committees later this fall. And in closing, I just want to reemphasize that Superstition Vistas is one of Arizona's fastest growing subregions. The study provides a forward-looking, data-informed framework to keep people moving and to help our member agencies respond to growth with coordinated multimodal transportation solutions. We truly appreciate your agency's continued guidance and support as we move toward the final plan that reflects both regional priorities and local needs. Thank you, Chair and members of the Management Committee. This concludes my presentation, and I would be available for any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Do we have any members present or online who have questions for Hannah?
Patrick,
Yes, Brian.
more comment just to say thank you. Great job. It outlines our programming for a long time for that region. And we have great partners in MAG and our elected officials that engaged. And thank you for coming out. And we look forward to working that great report. And we have methods in place to help with the state land out there. That's the blank slate to get ahead of this the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? Bruce, would you like to know if they can accelerate any of those projects?
Just a comment. Thanks, Mr. Chair. One of the things that's will be important as Santan Valley made the decision to incorporate, they're going to be an important partner with this transportation plan. So I look forward to working with that future government along with the other governments. I think it's 110,000. So
Now the entitled lots.
300,000. Well, for the population is the target.
Queen Creek has been challenged. It's dealing with so much of that. And
Mhm.
they've been so good in trying to work with the region.
Mhm. Hannah, is that in the Santan Valley? Is that in CAG, Central Arizona Governments? And
No,
So
that could probably
Yeah,
answer.
please.
Ed will be able to,
Yeah, Santan Valley is in the MAG.
oh, it's in
region.
MAG.
Yeah.
Okay.
but they will get an invite from CAG because it's entirely invited or inside of Pinal County. So we're in both. So I don't know how that's going to work.
We'll let you guys.
They may, but yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be working with them. But
We'll let you guys figure that
Yeah,
out.
we'll deal with that later.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Hannah? Thank you, Hannah. Great presentation. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 8, shifts in federal homeless funding and policies. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be introduced by Amy St. Peter, Director of Community Initiatives, and presented by Natalie Davenport, Senior Planner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for this time with you today. We are going to be sharing some significant and recent and still emerging changes at the federal level, which directly impact the ability of local governments and our ability throughout the region to address homelessness. I'd like to recognize our team, many of whom are here today. They're on the front lines tracking these changes and working very closely with your staff so that we might respond as a region in the best way possible. But first, a bit of background. You might be asking yourself, particularly if you're new to MAG, why are we talking about homelessness at MAG when so much of what we do really is transportation? 2 answers for that. One, as a regional planning agency, we've been engaged in addressing human services in general for nearly 50 years. We've been directly staffing the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care for over 25 years now, since 1999. And so over those years, we've been able to draw down millions of federal dollars to support our local homeless assistance programs. Just last year was a record year with more than $52 million awarded to this region because of the efforts of the Continuum of Care, staffed by MAG. Since 1999, we've drawn down more than $500 million in federal funding to support homeless assistance programs. Each year, more than just about 3,500 people of the region's most vulnerable people are supported through these programs. These people and this funding are at risk now because of these changes in federal policy and funding. Our team has been tracking this, and Natalie and Matt on our team have been taking the lead. It has been a group effort, but at this point now I'd like to turn it over to Natalie to talk with you about these changes, talk a little bit about the impact and what we're doing to respond as a region in close partnership with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Today's presentation will address 3 questions: what is currently being proposed at the federal level, the potential impact of these changes on our region, and what MAG is doing in response. Over the last 8 months, priorities have shifted significantly from 3 federal sources. First, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is departing from proven evidence-based practices, such as leading with housing solutions, toward enforcement-based and treatment-centered approaches. We're also seeing unexpected changes to funding. On July 3rd, HUD unexpectedly announced a funding application for FY25, despite previously committing to a 2-year award. This announcement came without clear criteria or timelines, creating uncertainty for our region's largest funding source for homelessness programs. At the same time, recent executive orders introduced new service restrictions, added documentation requirements, and a heavy focus on criminalization and institutionalization. Lastly, congressional budget proposals include cuts to Medicaid and other key supports for people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. Together, these changes signal uncertainty, and that uncertainty puts local systems under pressure. These federal changes could jeopardize funding for existing housing programs, potentially leading to thousands of vulnerable households losing their housing. 81% of our COC funding supports permanent housing for more than 2,000 of the most vulnerable individuals in our system. If HUD shifts away from permanent supportive housing toward treatment and recovery housing, many of these people could return to unsheltered homelessness. New federal eligibility restrictions could create additional barriers to service, forcing people to remain homeless for longer. These changes could also prioritize criminal justice and law enforcement response over housing solutions, approaches that diverge from proven evidence-based practices and place extra burden on emergency services. Locally, we are already under strain. In the past year alone, Maricopa County has lost over 1,000 shelter beds, and unsheltered homelessness rose by 28%. Federal shifts could compound these challenges, leading to a steep rise in homelessness. Our regional response system is uniquely vulnerable to federal funding shifts due to our disproportionate reliance on federal dollars. Unlike many other communities, we receive little to no support from non-federal funding sources. For example, King County Regional Homelessness Authority in Washington serves fewer people with a larger budget and has a greater resilience to adapt to these federal changes. While there is important funding at the city level, such as the contributions made by your jurisdictions, this slide focuses specifically on funding passing through the continuum of care. It's also worth noting that the state has approved $16.5 million in new funding for coordinated homelessness services through the Arizona Department of Economic Security. Because these funds do not pass through the continuum of care, they were not reflected in this slide. As the region's COC staffing agency, MAG is taking proactive steps to respond to these changes. First and foremost, our team is informing our community of the latest updates. We are monitoring federal policy and funding daily, identifying changes that may impact our partners, and sending weekly policy update emails to over 2,000 recipients. Next, we are coordinating with partners to craft regional responses to priority issues, such as the newly announced grant application and potential disruptions to services. This work depends on strong two-way communication. We ask jurisdictions to share timely information on emerging challenges, resource needs, and local response strategies so we can ensure alignment and coordination across the region. Finally, we are preparing multiple FY25 application scenarios to safeguard the $52 million in COC funding awarded last year. Thank you for your time today. Please reach out if there are ways that MAG can support your jurisdiction. We've included a QR code to sign up for our weekly newsletters, which contain the latest information pertaining to the COC and relevant federal updates. We are committed to being a strong regional partner through these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie and Amy. Do any members have questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Agenda item number 9, using data to identify freeway minor improvement opportunities. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion, will be introduced by Velvet Matthew, Freeway Engineering Manager, and presented by Wang Zhang, my apologies, Wang Zhang, apologies twice, Transportation Data Manager.
Mr. Chair, actually, and in the I don't think this is in the interest of time, sorry, that takes a little longer than we have, I think. So I think we would prefer to move that to another agenda and take the remaining time to talk about the air quality update, if that's all right.
Yes.
We can move to item 10, and I'll invite Matt Poppin to come give you the latest update on the significant work being done with the air quality team this summer in anticipation of this fall.
Okay.
Matt?
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Management Committee. Just as a reminder of where we have been, what we've been most active in the last few months is developing an estimate of the international emissions impact on our regional ozone. And what we're doing specifically is we're preparing what's known as a Clean Air Act, Section 179B demonstration to document that impact on our ozone. What this section of the Clean Air Act does, it allows a region to stay at our current ozone level. If we can prove we would have attained the ozone standard, but for the impact from international emissions. So I've got 4 updates on this to share with you today. So we've finished preliminary modeling, both internally and with our consultant Ramble, and the results show that up to 16 parts per billion of ozone is coming from international man-made emissions. So for context, the EPA standard is 70 parts per billion. So a significant part of the ozone is being transported from international sources to our region. What that means is that MAG can attain the ozone standard in 2023. That's the year we've been analyzing when we remove man-made emissions. So we will be presenting this final demonstration of our modeling results to the MAG policy committees in September and asking for your acceptance of this and then submittal to the EPA regional administrator for action. If EPA approves that demonstration, as I mentioned earlier, that will keep the area in our moderate ozone non-attainment area status and avoid additional sanctions and additional reclassifications of the region. So we'll stay a moderate non-attainment area, and we'll be able to demonstrate that we could have attained the standard once international emissions are removed. Kind of switching gears a little bit, I wanted to give an update on how this year's ozone season has been going. And we have some really surprising results to share with you. This graph shows our kind of average ozone concentration over time over the last 10 years. And you can see we've had a significant drop this year to an average of 52, and this is in the month of July. And then how many times did we exceed the EPA ozone standard in July as well? And this is the first month since EPA came out with the ozone standard in 2020, since 2015, that we've had no ozone exceedances. Our last ozone exceedance was June 18th, and we still haven't had any exceedances up to today as well. So it's been an amazingly clean year for ozone. The primary thinking of what's going on, and we're still studying this as well, is great weather, great ventilation rates. We've had a little bit extra air movement, both vertically and horizontally, and that hasn't allowed ozone to accumulate and cause an exceedance. So we're continuing to track this, but this is a great result, and wanted to let you know that this is occurring currently. And then lastly, during this time as well, the Regional Council and the Management Committee committed to help fund the GLORE project, the Ground Level Ozone Research Project, to the tune of $750,000. And that is revealing some surprising results as well. As I mentioned, June 18th was our last exceedance day. And one of the really specialized pieces of equipment that GLORE study has put out is called Ozone LiDAR. It's able to see the ozone from the ground level all the way up to the stratosphere. And what that piece of equipment captured on June 18th is you could see ozone descending from the stratosphere all the way down to the ground level. So the high values of ozone are represented in red and yellow colors. And you can see over time, it's sort of descended from the stratosphere down to the ground level in between, causing an exceedance on June 19th. So we were able to tell that the exceedance, our last exceedance that occurred, was not due to our man-made emissions here locally, but actually intrusion from natural ozone down to ground level. This is kind of the great science we were hoping the Gore project would reveal, and it's been a great finding, helping us understand our ozone problem here and what we can do about it. So that concludes my update. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Matt. Excellent presentation. Do we have any questions or comments from any members?
I think we'll attribute the no ozone exceedances in July to the new chairmanship of MAG Management Committee. Is that
You know,
what you're saying?
I was thinking that, Ed. I didn't want to say it. Kevin's very sensitive. For those of you who don't know him enough.
I think though this is an example of, in all seriousness, the investment by the region in the staffing and Matt's really amazing staff, the investment in the study that shows 16 parts per billion. You know, we thought it was maybe 8 or 10 at most, and the study is actually showing more. That's really important. And then the investment by the region in this LIDAR that Matt showed at the end, all that is what it's going to take to present to Washington, D.C. to say, you've got to have different ways of regulating us because we can prove to you with science what's going on here. So it's been a great investment, and thank you all for your support.
Absolutely. Great work, Matt. Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 11, the Executive Director's Report. Ed?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very, very quickly, we first of all want to start with a celebration for two of our own here. Please join me in congratulating Tempe City Manager Rosa Inchausti and Florence Town Clerk Lisa Garcia, who were both recognized at ACMA this year as Gabe Zimmerman Public Service honorees by the Center for the Future of Arizona. And it's named in honor of Congresswoman Gabby Gifford staffer Gabe Zimmerman, who gave his life defending her and the public in a terrible attack in Tucson. And thanks to Rosa and Lisa for their public service and commitment. And so I think that's pretty cool, the two of our. And finally, just following up on what Matt said, the next slide, it's been important to you and to some of your mayors that we continue to work regionally in the Intermountain West. And so just last month, Matt and Audra and I went to Salt Lake City for a one-day convening of our Intermountain West partners. That would be the MPOs in Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Reno, Boise, and Spokane, Washington. We got together to discuss areas of interest. The major one was air quality. Everyone's experiencing similar things, so we're trading information. Matt, no surprise to you, Matt Poppin is seen as the expert. I think he probably spends too much of his day in his mind, maybe answering calls from Utah and elsewhere about what's going on, but we don't mind it because we're exchanging a lot of good information. But Matt is on speed dial around the West with what we're finding out here, and just to work together and know that we're all sharing the same issues it's much more effective for us to coordinate with our congressional delegations, and some of that is happening where we're connecting folks in Utah with our congressmen here and senators and vice versa. So it's been a good investment of time and resources, and just wanted to report on that. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions for Ed on any items contained in his report? Okay, there is no legislative update today. We'll move to item 13. Are there any requests for membership for an item on a future agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 14. Any comments from the committee on the whole? Okay, then we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Good job, Chair.
Thank you, Pat.
1 o'clock on the dot.
Thanks, Ed. That was very nice.